All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm broadcasting from Park City, Utah, where I am, and David's in Dallas. Dallas, you said, right? Dallas,
Correct.
Texas, in the background there. So super excited to have a chat today about the documentary Grid Down. Really interesting subject for me personally, and I know that a lot of the Family Office Insights members have indicated that they have interest in the potential hazard of the grid, and as we know, is in jeopardy in many ways. And so, after I watched the documentary, I reached out to David, who I don't really know, but our path has crossed at some point, David, I think. But he kindly agreed to chat with us today and talk more about what not just the documentary, but what's really going on, and perhaps fill in some of the stuff that has he's learned since the documentary. So if you could, David, maybe give us a little background on you, and then how you got to decide to do this documentary, and it would be super helpful.
Sure. Well, very excited to be on your program with all your family office clients and viewers. So, I'm an investment guy. I'm actually a CFA, passed a CPA back in the day, actually ran an investment research firm where we produced a product called Behind the Numbers that operated for a decade and a half. Then I ran two mutual funds, the Prudent Bear Mutual Fund, as well as an international bond fund, the Global Prudent Global Income Fund. And then so I got into this movie about 4 years ago because I realized I was a NASA grandfather. My grandkids were 4, 3, 2, 1. Houston, we have a problem.
Wow, right, no shit. Well,
Because I'm real happy where I've been blessed to be on this earth during this great period of time. But I worry about my grandkids where if the power grid goes out, it's not going to be such a favorable world. And I think the risk has never been higher for our adversaries either taking out our power grid or a solar storm, massive GMD, geomagnetic disturbance, taking out our power grid. And I'm not just talking about a 2 or 3 day outage. I'm talking about the entire power system going out for months at a time, even over a year. And if that happens, there will be tens of millions of people dying. And in the United States of America, the most deaths that we've had, what happened in Galveston in the 1910s, and we know even 9/11 killed about less than 3,000 people, but we're talking about tens of millions of people dying. And the thing is, this is highly preventable. There is equipment available that can be strapped on the front of substations. There is cybersecurity cloaking software that is available to prevent essentially cyber attacks on our critical civilian infrastructure. And therefore, it's just a travesty that we don't pay more attention to our critical civilian infrastructure. So I know that film is a great way to reach people and to let them know what some of the risk is so that we can mobilize people and get this vulnerability resolved.
yeah. So what was really interesting to me was that during the movie and at the end, you actually proposed solutions. You Many people come and say, the sky is falling, and then they walk off the stage without any solutions. So it's not very helpful. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but right before COVID, out of frustration, I held a impact conference at the United Nations, and it was done not in the context of Family Office Insights, but it was done mostly because I'm just an investor and I like impact type stuff. And I was a victim of many people doing exactly that, coming up on stage and saying the world is falling, climate change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they just walked off the stage and didn't propose any solutions. So I really appreciate that you had done that during the movie at the end and suggested, ways that this can be averted. Um, One of the things that is is often said is that most people have got 3 days worth of provisions, and then they're starting to pull out the guns and protect, try to find food for their family. When have you been in a position to talk about that a little bit? In other words, it's something that we don't think about, but if the power goes down, it affects everything. The least of which is refrigeration, or perhaps the most. Is that statistic hold water?
It certainly does, Arthur. And this film is more policy driven as far as saying that we can fix this, but there's a overtone in terms of what does this mean for the viewer and his or her own family, and therefore what FEMA recommends is that we have some backup food, but we tend to have this complacency that we will always have Uber Eats or it'll come back soon.
Yeah, right.
And maybe we have a little bit of food in, our pantry from Costco. But frankly, I do think individuals ought to think about a plan B or a bolt hole where they can get to, because population density is not your friend if the power goes out for a long period of time. And even if you have lots of guns, people are going to sneak up on you or wait till you're asleep. Or if you've got a generator and you've got the lights on and your refrigerator is working, even your neighbor next door that didn't prepare so much that you talk
You're a
to,
target, right?
you're a target, and therefore you better get the hell out, frankly, and have a place to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that, and it's interesting in Utah here, part of the Mormon LDL culture is preparedness. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of people that have, safe rooms and bunkers and that sort of thing, more so than I've been exposed to being a New York City guy, right? And it's really interesting how seriously they take it. And there's cause for it. I mean, you've illuminated a couple of the reasons. Is the population density uh, problem further exacerbated by the uh, the people in the cities are obviously not prepared for any of this, and what's going to happen to them? Are they going to like run over the Brooklyn Bridge like we did in 9/11 to try to get out?
I mean, it will be, desperation. And people have said, uh, I mean, you're talking about the first day. How about like 9 days in,
Yeah,
when people are starving, and if it where there's no water because individuals need water or they'll die, after 3 days.
yeah.
And therefore it truly could be zombie apocalypse without the zombies. And so just a horrific scenario. And there's going to be people that do have guns that are just going to, shoot themselves rather than look forward to a life like that, frankly.
Yeah, well, that totally makes sense. In the movie, you talked about the uh, problem of the lobbyists for the power company saying, "Wait a minute, we can fix this, but we want the feds to pay for it because it's going to get into our balance sheet." And so they've been fighting about this, apparently, who should pay for what is a solution that's there. Has there been any progress on that?
So it's pretty horrific, the bureaucratic ineptitude that we've had. And frankly, the utilities are, at some significant fault. Now some utilities are better than others, and there is technology available that can help prevent our transformers going down. There's a company in Houston, CenterPoint Energy, that has actually developed some technology. We discuss it in our film, and they actually showed it to, they joint ventured with Siemens, and they showed it to a number of utilities across the country, and it essentially received very little interest. The utilities are waiting on the regulators to demand it. Our regulators have let us down significantly. Barack Obama actually was arguing and issued an executive order back in the 2015 time period saying that we ought to protect our substations against a 1 in 100 year storm. But then that instruction was sent to regulators, and NERC, which is the North American Electricity Corporation, that's governed by 12 trustees, they essentially dropped the ball completely and protected against a much less severe disruption.
So they did something, but it fell way short, huh? Is that
dramatically short, such that it doesn't even require any of the utilities to make any, changes to what they have right now. And we think that's because that organization is in the pocket of the utilities. There's been regulatory capture, and therefore, and Donald Trump passed an executive order codified into law in the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act. And then there was a number of measures that were delegated to DOE and DHS. And unfortunately, bureaucrats inside those organizations just have not followed through. So, what I'm calling for is that we need a Manhattan Project scale initiative. Over $1 billion came in for the movie Oppenheimer, where Matt Damon played the significant role of General Leslie Groves.
yeah?
And he was essentially a badass who broke down doors and, kicked in and talked to, screamed at people to make sure, and he had the authority to make sure this Manhattan Project, took place. That's what we need today to overcome, the bureaucratic ineptitude.
Have have the regulators and that 12 trustee group and others whose agenda they're trying to protect? Look, people behave based on their own self-interest oftentimes, and they're just trying to keep their hands on their cookies, whether it's a position of power or money or whatever, right? Have they given you any trouble, any pushback because you're highlighting this problem to the general public?
Haven't, I'm actually became friends with an ex-FERC regulator. There's only 7, FERC commissioners. FERC stands for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and he is on my side, and he believes that what I'm doing represents the Lord's work, and that we need this Manhattan Project. So that we've had board members of other public utilities that have seen the film, and they nod their head. And so there are people that our film has received, rave reviews. We've been on Tucker Carlson with Dennis
I
Quaid.
saw Dennis on Tucker. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So people are starting to pay attention, but we're still kind of a small group here in Dallas, and we need a number of, we need mama bears and soccer dads, and we'd love some bigger money to get behind us. We would love to have a Elon Musk, a Peter Thiel, those kind of people that are thinking big. The second part of this Manhattan Project that I think is required and makes sense is to look at our power grid that's been around more than 70 years and lay out a master plan about which energy we're going to utilize. We know that hydrogen power is coming. It's not quite here yet. SMRs, small modular reactors. We need the right blend of renewables, but this move to go to 100% renewables, that's not going to work either, because we need dispatchable power, and therefore we need some hydrocarbons as well as nuclear. And so we need the greatest minds to get together, and I call this the second phase of our Manhattan Project. America's had their back up against a wall before, and we can overcome this, and we just need to do it. I have a petition facility, specifically talking about how we need this Manhattan Project initiative. We have a facility on our website where you can send pre-written emails and make phone calls to your state legislators, federal legislators, as well as your FERC commissioners, your NERC trustees, your chairman of your state PUC, et cetera. So we can do this, but we need more viewers, and we can get this done.
So we'll do it again when we socialize this out to the group, but just give them the website, just where they can go. What's the URL?
Yeah, so the URL is griddownpowerup.com. The facility to write those letters is in the right-hand corner under the Participate tab. You will find a link to get you to YouTube, where you can watch the movie for free. It's also available on Salem Now. We are soon to be on Amazon as well. Again, the movie is free. We have some joint venture e-commerce sponsors that will allow you to participate and help the film, where we have solar generators potentially available for purchase, as well as freeze-dried food, and as well as putting solar panels on your own rooftop.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I found it really clever, and I was just wondering how it's been received, because you actually have those type of solutions, advertisers in the movie. How did that work out? Because that's unusual, right? How did that work out for you?
Well, it's just getting started. We've had about 100,000 people watch the movie. We're looking for 20 million people to watch the movie.
Yeah.
This needs to be a contract with America, a Tea Party movement type of initiative. The thing is, it's not the investment people in your audience, the family office people, are just going to be shocked by the fact of how inexpensive some of these fixes might be, and the fact that this bureaucratic ineptitude has gotten us. But we're excited about a couple of our sponsors. This is a way for us to keep the movie free. We're not a believer in not as many people are going to see it. If we charge for it, we don't want to go to Netflix, because Netflix will not allow our embedded ads.
Yeah, right. I was pretty much under the impression that that wouldn't happen, because they just want to pay you for the movie and not have a conflicting revenue source in there. So let's talk about because I was going to ask you, in the continuum of solutions, what's the low side and the high side? Because I remember you mentioning this, I think, but the amount of money that would take to secure, I guess, there's 3 or 4 grids in the US. I'm sorry, I'm not going to get the details right, but you get my point. What's the the low side of the solution and the high side of the solution? Because it's like a ridiculously low number in terms of the hazard that we're potentially under, right?
Exactly. So I'd say our low side number would be $5 billion would protect a great deal. That would protect against what's called E3, which is a pulse that comes from either an electromagnetic pulse attack, which is a detonation in the atmosphere, or a geomagnetic disturbance. And then the other big fix is essentially cloaking software that would protect our microprocessors and our sensors that, and if you watch the Julia
Like a
Roberts movie,
Faraday type situation?
no, this is not a Faraday cage. This is actually protecting sensors. And so what was interesting, this Baltimore Harbor Bridge,
Right.
catastrophe, where this ship, it was said they lost power, but if you look closely, it looked like it changed directions and, came into this pier and caused this massive, cataclysmic attack in Baltimore shipping.
Yeah.
Uh, if you watch the movie Leave the World Behind with Julia Roberts,
Yeah, I did watch that. Yeah, it was crazy.
that
Yeah.
that Barack and Michelle Obama were executive producers. They were talking about sensors and microprocessors essentially being compromised, and causing, an oil freighter to come up on shore, Tesla navigation systems to be compromised and crashing in one area, airplanes crashing, et cetera. So that's a cyber attack, that can happen on critical civilian infrastructure. And there is software fixes available to be put on the front end that will protect against that.
So that's the low end of the continuum, about 5 billion. How much more money and how long it would take, aside from, I know it's a complex question or answer to the question, but there's also decentralization of the power, right? Because the transmission is part of the problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So there's three parts to the grid. There's generation, transmission, and distribution. I've been really focused on, the major transformers. These are high voltage transformers. There's about 2,000 of those that, are responsible for really keeping the grid, on.
Howard,
And
yeah.
essentially, these are multiple hundred tons each and can be, frankly, we need better US manufacturing capability for those transformers. Right now, there is a 5 to 7 year backlog. We've sent, a number of our spare transformers in this category to the Ukraine. And so this big vulnerability is if our major transformers go out, and essentially there are critical nodes. And FERC ended up doing a report after a physical attack happened in Metcalf, California, back in 2013. And they found that as few as 9 critical substations, if they were taken out, could cause a coast to coast blackout.
Wow.
So I think you were asking for the higher end number. I'd say the higher end number is probably $100 billion, but we can protect a lot if we protect key critical nodes.
Yeah. The other thing that you talked about in the movie, or maybe it was me just interpreting it this way, is that since a lot of these, or apparently a lot of these transformers are non-US built, that there's suspicion that there's back doors built into them by the Chinese manufacturers. Am I going down the wrong road there?
No, you're exactly right. And we mentioned that briefly in the film. There's about 430 transformers that we know about that have been imported from China. And we know we've seized one of those transformers and it's gone through some inspection, but it's top secret. And we were not able to get, all details about what was found. But a couple data points are that Jennifer Granholm, current Secretary of Energy under Joe Biden, was asked on a Sunday morning talk show if our grid was compromised, if there are adversaries essentially inside the grid such that they could shut it down. And she responded affirmatively. Maine Senator Angus King, held a hearing in the Senate, and he was saying this is an emergency situation. Our adversaries are in the grid, and therefore, and we know that FBI Director Christopher Wray, has been out railing both to Mike Gallagher's senatorial committee on China. He just gave some speeches at Vanderbilt University just in the last couple of weeks, saying that our adversaries are in and are targeting our critical civilian infrastructure.
Yeah. So help me understand this, because I didn't really get it on some level, and maybe I got it on another level. So where I'm headed is a guy like Elon Musk could solve this problem and align the problem solution with his interests, which is you can't charge electric vehicles unless you have a power grid. And he's done that similar type, I'll call it self-serving, not in a derogatory way, by aside from his interest in going to space as a kid, and if you read about what his interests are, that all emanated early on from, I think the book was what's the name of the book, Sphere? That you wrote, the Galaxy, Hitchhiker's Galaxy book. Anyway, so part of his intention of building SpaceX was because he had this desire to go to space, right? You would think that he would have an aligned interest to go to and solve this grid problem because his interests will be served. Do you think that there's more going on there? Does the general population think this is conspiratorial? You prove that it's not. What do you think? Why isn't a guy like that just laying down $40 billion like he did with X to solve the problem?
Well, he probably hasn't seen my film yet,
Right.
and obviously he's a brilliant guy, and so that's why I love this idea about a Manhattan Project, because this the first part of what I outlined is pathetically small. I mean, here we already have the products that can fix it. We already have we just need, we've had executive orders, we've had legislation passed, and people just aren't stepping up and doing the right thing. That's why we need a head knocker that'll bust down doors. The second part of this is huge. I mean, in terms of, like you said, with EVs, you look at the AI we have, you look at demand for power from for AI going forward with data centers, you look at Bitcoin, mining, etc. We need better, more microgrids. I think this needs to be more decentralized going forward. And so we need the biggest brains, to sit down, and we know hydrogen power is coming. We all like renewables, but it can't be in significant percentage, or there are all kind of issues going back and forth between DC and AC that actually creates harmonics, that creates issues with downstream, automation and machinery.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It's super interesting, right? So that,
yeah, there's all kind of degrading. So we need brilliant guys. So I hope some of your family office viewers get this to Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, the big thinkers, and we need Warren Buffett's involvement. We can fix this, but this needs to be big.
So so let's recap. Go to the website, sign the petitions, get your representatives involved. Do you have like an outline of the Manhattan Project that you have in mind? on the website?
Uh, I've got a couple slides for it. We need to, my email is dtice@tice.com, and you can just reach out on our website, and the messages will get to me. And we have lots of ideas. We need more mama bears, soccer dads. We have an advisory board that's made up of 17 individuals to kind of help me with some of the issues on the movie, but we need more help for sure.
Yeah, so let's see if we can't help here with the community and do some outreach for you. Listen, there's it's not far out, meaning this isn't something that one would dismiss as a problem that isn't real. It's super real, like, and it's devastating in its impact, and especially as you say, first day's one thing, the ninth day's a whole different story, right? It's I mean, look what there's rolling blackouts. I mean, California's kind of crazy in its politics anyway and implementation of things, and they're saying they want EV vehicles, at a certain percentage over a certain and they can't even charge the ones that they have now. They have rolling blackouts, right? Um, and so it all doesn't add up. Kind of the old what's the old saying, right? Watch what they do, don't listen to what they say, right?
Yeah. So a couple points on that is that California actually back in 2018 passed two pieces of legislation unanimously asking for the federal government to step up and better protect our critical civilian infrastructure against EMP and GMD. The other point I'd like to make is sense of urgency. The time is now. I mean, I say we are potentially on the cusp of three major conflicts. You look at Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Israel. That's one. You look at Ukraine and Russia. That's two. But then we're pretty close to the Chinese and Taiwan, and we
Right.
don't know when something is going to happen there. And China has already declared a people's war against the United States of America. We know there's a lot of countries out there that hate our guts. And you combine that with the fact that we've essentially had, don't want to get too political. And again, this movement is all, very, very nonpartisan. But,
Totally.
the one issue that we do have is this open border where a lot of bad guys have been getting in. And essentially, there's the threat of sleeper cells like
Yeah, potential
Dennis
cells
Quaid.
building in our right inside our. I mean, I'm totally on board. This whole border thing is complicated, but there's obvious agenda involved.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So that could be another problem, having people come in and impair the grid from the inside out, right?
right. So we need action now. I'm trying to get Greg Abbott to hold a special session in Texas, and protect our key nodes. There's been discussions recently. Christopher Wray has certainly been, going to the airways to talk about how important this critical civilian infrastructure is. There's discussion of water systems, about how easy it would be for bad guys to compromise our municipal water systems. And therefore, so I'm going to Abbott to say that we need a special session right now in the state of Texas and take this seriously right now, because we know there's a significant threat, before the election potentially, and we're not that many months away. And therefore, even if we can take some stopgap measures, we know the Chicago water system is actually better protected, utilizing cyber cloaking, to protect their system.
So it
And
can be
therefore,
done.
it can be done.
So one of the things that, just a little editorial, I recognize and I think is true is that most people aren't paying attention to a lot of things, as it relates to politics and what's going on in the country and all the stuff that we just talked about. And it's largely because they have bandwidth issues. They're getting up and going to work every morning. They're bringing, Joey to soccer and, so on and so forth. And they just don't have the bandwidth. And then when something invades their bandwidth that they don't think they can do anything about, then they just dismiss it. Not positive or negative. They just say, well, I can't think about that. I got to take Joey to soccer, right? Feed my family, go to the grocery store and make sure I get plenty of sleep and exercise and blah, blah, blah. So I think what you're saying with mama bears and papa bears, it's a kind of a grassroots thing. Let's make people aware of, what the issues are. And it doesn't take much effort to jump on the website, watch the movie, because you're going to watch something anyway. So I think that, getting to those soccer moms or whatever, dads, whatever they are, is probably a very effective method. So let's see if we can't help you do that.
Yeah, we just signed on with Moms for America, and they are maybe one of the fastest growing organizations of patriotic, energetic, passionate, literally soccer moms. And
Wow, that's good to hear. Yeah,
so we're excited about that. And, we're just, kicking it, making this happen.
yeah. So David, can we do this again in a little bit to get an update on how you're
I
doing?
I
Yeah,
would love to be on your show
yeah,
whenever you'd like. So,
yeah. I super appreciate it. And thanks for making the time to do it today, and thank you everybody for paying attention to us and spending with us the only thing you can't make more of, and that's your time. So we'll make sure we have David back and give you an update and get all the information to you directly so you can help in this regard. It's kind of a frightening situation, but it sounds like we've got a solution. So super
yeah.
appreciate that, David.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much.
much. Okay. Take care.
Bye.